Welcome to the Nexus Unloaded podcast. This is Will Crozier.
And I'm Zach Congonis. We are here to bring you the best solutions to your lifting problems. Through our real-world experience, we hope to break things down in a digestible, applicable, and entertaining way. So are we starting off with my lockjaw?
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to hear all about it.
I just can't open my mouth too far. And contrary to what Mickey said, it's not from too much. Is it? It's fellatio? Nah, this should use the correct term, fellatio. I always got it.
Since when are we the podcast use correct term?
This is a huge pivot. When I was in like year 7, we were doing.
God.
I think it was Hamlet. Which Shakespeare?
Hold on.
Which Shakespearean play is the character Horatio from? I think it's Hamlet.
CSI
Miami, yeah. Pretty sure he's...
Well, apparently CSI Miami stole one of Shakespeare's characters, and there was a girl in my class doing a presentation, and she mixed up the word Horatio with fellatio, and it was like one of those hallmark moments in high school where I don't think I've heard a class laugh so much. Then for the rest of the schooling, her name was Zoe Fellatio, which is
I can tell you that I would not have known at the ripe age of 16 or something like that. Year 7?
Yeah, he said year 7. That's not 16. Yeah, that's
like 12.
Fucking,
I would not have known at year 7's 12. I would not have known what fellatio meant at the ripe age of 12.
No, you didn't spend copious amounts of time on Urban Dictionary finding new words?
No, I still don't know like how to operate Urban Dictionary. I try and find like cool like catchy words and stuff like that.
I'm trying to Mickey's like, I've got to relate to my clients.
So when I first heard like the MSC boys talking about clout, I was like, what is clout?
Look it up.
I'm Dictionary.
Yeah.
So like I call
You're not old enough to have to do that, Mickey.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know like cool words. I'm generic.
What age do you feel like you can start like looking up terms for kids? Like I've seen like stuff online where like people have said like abbreviations and like like right now like RN or whatever, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? Like I've said like, and then you figure it out.
It was just the other day. Like I was. Someone commented on Will's photo of him and Bowser, YTB, and I was like, Will, what does YTB mean? Yeah. And he's like, the boys. And I was like, okay.
Internet slang.
A bunch of the like younger age kids at Pro will say, I forgot the word, but it was a word for good, like the equivalent of like sick. But it was like a new word that I hadn't heard.
Oh, you know one that kind of got me at first?
No,
like,
it wasn't. It was Kuma. It was Kuma, someone who masturbated too much.
Are you serious? What's that?
It's like a Kuma. Like you say, hey, you're a Kuma. Like you spend all day in your room masturbating because you've got nothing better to do. It's an insult.
Oh my
God.
An
insult. That was the word.
Yeah, well, I still haven't heard that. You know what threw me for a little bit? Mid. Like, everyone was like, that's mid. What the fuck is mid? Like,
does that mean good, bad, or like it's average?
It's like average or some shit, yeah.
See, I don't get this. Like, even, like, again, going back to the MSC boys, because they're all down with, like, lingos.
Down with
lingo. That's how good Mickey's down with lingo right there.
At Nexus Performance, do you want to be coached by mid-20-year-olds who actually act like 70-year-olds? Come on.
I'm wise. No, so they were using the term malacca, and I was like, okay. I just said to him, and this was like months after.
I still don't know what it means. I just go with it.
It's. I'm going to pull up my conversation. It's something I don't know, Zach. What you tell us? What does malacca mean? You should know.
Isn't malacca just shit? Malacca's just. It's just shit. I think.
It's okay. So it's a wanker or a tosser in Greek.
Okay.
So I was like, I'm so sorry, but I have to ask, what does malacca mean? Is it like a lad? Like, oh yeah, the lads. Yeah. No. And he's like, no, it means that they're like a tosser. Enough. And I was like,
my Greek school teacher's rolling over in a grave.
This is what I mean. Like, I don't understand things. Like, I don't. Well, not.
That's just a different language.
Just sounds stupid. Yeah. Yes, but like, I call Will a dingus all the time.
That's a cool word.
It is.
It's pretty old. I feel like.
A dingus.
Yeah, well, most people know that.
Well, you had to Urban Dictionary it
to get the exact meaning. It's not like I didn't know roughly. You need to just know the ballpark of what it means. You don't need to know like the definition
of a dingus.
Yeah.
See, I prefer the old man like metaphors and statements that don't make sense. Like you pick random adjective, random action, add insult. Like, you're more useless than a two-toed cat screaming at a fence. They're my favorite ones because you can just put together the best things and they get such a good reaction.
Yeah, but sometimes yours go a little bit crazy.
Good. You want to question it. You want people to get the ideal reaction from something like that is that they're just confused. Like, they're not even insulted. That they're just like, what? What did you say? Like, it's not even. Yeah, you don't want to.
It's a tactic.
Yeah,
it stops the flow of conversation and gives you time to think.
Yeah, it's a smoke screen, and then you run away. Flashbang.
So your tooth, how's your tooth going now?
My tooth is fine. I just can't open my mouth too much, which is why I'm confused.
I was trying to eat a straw before. Does that make sense? Did people the lockjaw thing was because of the tooth? Like,
yeah.
Well, if you get an infection, then the muscles in the jaw are inflamed and they lock up.
Because last time you had to pull a tooth, you had this same symptom.
Yeah, my bottom wisdom teeth were pissed off. I think I cut the gum with a Dorito. You know when you eat a Dorito like a spastic and it just cuts it, and then got infected. And
it's
then
like Toblerones.
Yeah, I had a sick dentist, and he has a game where he tries to pull the tooth out before the dental assistant gets back. So he pretty much just like forces me into the chair and starts digging around in my face with the pliers. It's a game that I play that I try to get it out before the lady gets back.
Yeah, I don't want to play this fucking game. No, thank you,
He did it.
mate.
He fucking got it out there quick smart. The dental nurse came back and was like, "How the fuck do you keep doing that?"
Yeah,
and he's been my dentist ever since.
Like, I'm not a fan of those dental games. I hate going to the dentist. My sister's a dental assistant, and I fucking hate it.
See,
I had all 4 wisdom teeth removed. I don't know if you remember. Was it when were we last down in Melbourne? But I had really, really bad toothache, and I was like actually crying, like I was in agony. Went to Pro Raw Gym, and I just was in complete silence in the corner, like working from the front reception, didn't talk to anyone whilst Will was training, which if anyone knows me, that is very, very out of character. And
Mickey loves the chat.
Yeah. Will can't drive very well, let alone driving my parents' 4-wheel drive with a bull bar around the streets of Melbourne. So I had to drive home. And I think I put the music on silent, like I muted everything, and I was just clenching in absolute agony. And I said to Will, I was like, I would never ever wish this sort of pain on my worst enemy. Like, this is absolute agony. Like, toothaches are fucked. I had all 4 removed after that. So yeah,
when we joined the Navy, what they were during the recruits, because like when you first get in, they take like X-rays in your mouth and all that, and then if they're like growing on an angle and they can tell like within the next 5 years, whatever, it's gonna like need something done, they just remove it then and there, like before you start your career, kind of like they're like, nah, let's fuck that off because that'll be a problem later, because they just don't want you. I guess they don't want it to impact later on, you know.
So you didn't have any? You have all your wisdom teeth removed? Or yours all came through?
Mine all through. I have all my teeth. I have the most teeth of anyone here. So, brag, just a small flex.
You also have, like, the nicest teeth as well. You have, like, perfectly straight, beautiful teeth that you do not look after at all.
Why bother?
It's a myth. Toothpaste is a myth.
Yeah. Why would you?
It just annoys the hell out. Did you have braces, Zach? Did you ever have braces growing up?
When I was younger, I had, those twin block plates. This is why I'm funny, because I was an incredibly ugly child. No looker now, but fuck, I was an unfortunately looking kid. So when I closed my mouth, my bottom teeth completely covered my top teeth completely covered my bottom gums, like all the way. Yeah, complete overbite. So we had a nice orthodontist who took all of my parents' money dragging my jaw forward. Then that made all the teeth crooked. Then I had full braces. So I think I had metal in my mouth for about 6 to 7 years.
Oh, gross. I had braces growing up. But
real good teeth now, though. But, I was an unfortunately looking kid.
If anyone has any interesting if anyone has any interesting teeth stories, if they've ever lost a tooth, actually, I do have an interesting tooth story, and then we'll round it up there on the teeth stories.
Yeah, we've been going for like 10 minutes on teeth.
Yeah, but I do actually have. So growing up as a kid, I played a lot of contact sports and stuff like that. One of them was rugby league, and I was playing in the under 12 boys class because it was just mixed, and one of the kids was getting tackled and was near the outside, and like they slung him by the jersey and his face came around and I got a tooth. I actually have a mark here, a tooth in my knee. And in North Queensland, there's a lot of, Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander, all that sort of stuff. They went and made me get a tetanus shot after having this kid's tooth put through my knee.
Never know. Bad as a needle.
Yeah, I actually grew up with this kid over the years and stuff like that. And very good friends with him over time. But yeah, I had someone's tooth go like through my fucking knee.
Into your quad.
Into my quad. Yeah, which I now have a really cool scar for. So
did the tooth come out?
No. Tooth stayed in.
Oh, it would have been way cooler. I was picturing it just hanging in there.
No, hold on, wait. Like, it left the kid's mouth and it was in your leg.
He opened his mouth and kind of bit me on the way through like a vampire and bit me on the knee. No, I think it was like, so I'm picturing, like swinging around and his mouth opened and it's like a canine in my knee.
So you got bitten via the velocity of the person being... I thought there was like a tooth in your leg.
No, he just.
And then I was going to say, did you keep it? Because I probably would have.
Oh God, no.
What, wear it around your
trophy,
neck?
like a shark.
Oh well, you put it in like one of the random drawers that has all the spare batteries. Yeah, like put it in the spare battery drawer. In 20 years, like, oh fuck, his tooth was stuck in my knee. Why do I still have this?
Good times.
Might need that for a podcast one day.
Yeah.
So moving on to today's topic. Is we're going to talk a little bit about like minimal dose training to some degree, and it's a topic that I don't think a lot of people think about because, like, I guess the common thought line would be like, why the fuck would I do the minimal when I want to get maximal? You know what I mean?
If it's not maximal, why bother?
If my there's probably not a lot of people out there who start powerlifting or start a strength sport and go like, you know what? I want to be slightly stronger than what I am now. I definitely don't want too much results. Don't want to get too strong. You know, like there's not many people out there. So like, if you're framing it like that, it sounds stupid. But there are instances where knowing the minimum dose for training, like how little you can do, and whether your goal is to like maintain or move forward, get a little bit stronger, get a little bit bigger, is really useful. So like. I would the first like road that I would go down is like, because it should be familiar to people that will listen to previous episodes, is like your situation, Zach, like a hybrid training model where you've got multiple goals. You still kind of want to be strong in SBD. You're still doing some like clean and jerks, some snatches, some power work. You're doing some plyos. You're doing some dunks. Well, you're trying to do some dunks. and like explain to us like how that training's set up and how a minimum dose would be ideal in that, or not ideal.
Yeah, well, if we take it back, and first I think it's going to be important to just describe what the dose and volume relationship actually looks like. Yeah. The amount of work it's going to take you to maintain. So the amount of work that it takes you to get worse is hardly fucking doing the thing at all.
Yeah.
You can do the piddliest amount of effort, and we'll get into actual recommendations later on, but you can do such a piddly amount of effort and still maintain what you've got pretty effectively.
Yeah.
But as soon as you cross that precipice of just enough volume, the ability to improve shoots up quite aggressively. So once you've got more than just enough, there's a big jump, and then there's not really another big jump. Yes, as you do more within your recoverability, you continue increasing the rate of improvement. Yep. However, there's not another massive spike as in not enough to enough. So when it comes to things like a hybrid approach or trying to push multiple goals and multiple fitness qualities at the same time, depending on how well you recover, if you can satisfy the minimum requirements for each of the avenues you're trying to go down, you get progression in everything with minimal interference. The amount of things that you have will dictate how much love goes to each of them. So if you have one outcome to push, well, fucking pile it on. You're now a specialist in one thing. When you start pushing 2, 3, 4 things, there's going to be a certain amount that you won't be able to continue to progress. But if within 4 things you can satisfy all the minimum requirements and still recover and feel good, then in theory you should get progression in all of those avenues, even if some of those goals are completely opposed, say endurance training and strength work. Even though they may interfere, if you're satisfying volume, you're satisfying intensity demands, and you're doing enough of it, you should progress it.
Yeah, I think it's a it's a really good like example of where minimums, you kind of need to know your minimums. How did you, when you started down this hybrid road, did you like start by doing too much, or like did you start at too little and kind of like add a little bit? Like how did you find like the dose for each?
Way too much. We started off way too much because I
think everyone can agree, because I think like when you're pushing one avenue, like when you were just doing powerlifting, you kind of get in this routine. You get in your head like, okay, like I was doing 10 sets of, let's just say 10 sets of squats, 10 sets of 10, 15 sets of bench and maybe whatever of deadlift per week. And like I was getting gains on that, on squat, bench, deadlift. And then when you go to the new thing, it's easy enough to say, like in your mind, you're like, okay, if I just add this other stuff on top, it should work, right? Like that's the easy kind of trap to fall into. And like you said, it's actually surprising how little you can do and still move forward or at worst maintain. So I think most people would be in your boat.
Yeah, the first time we did it, I remember it was after, so I was powerlifting, then I did like a proper specialization in weightlifting just to be less shit at it. And then after that's when I kind of moved into the hybrid style stuff. Essentially, the first hybrid program was the powerlifting program and the weightlifting program done at the same time.
Yeah.
And and then within that, trying to add sprinting to it is when I blew my hamstring out.
Yeah.
And
not unexpected if you looking back. Hindsight's a beautiful thing.
Looking back, it was an awful idea, but we essentially tried to just blend it all together. Didn't really fucking work, which is after trial and error, we've kind of just ended up in, we have what we'd call a base template of, okay, everything satisfied volume-wise, and then all you do is you take the slider up for exposures and volume dependent on what's more important. So for me right now, the dunk's more important than anything else, so it gets more exposures than the rest of it, whereas arm hypertrophy is actually above my bench priorities. So I have more arms than I do bench. And then it's just flipping the switches at that point. And it does help quite a lot to have specific goals. Because again, if you don't have a specific goal to what you want to push, then how the fuck do you know the minimums?
And I want to also throw out here, just quickly on this, like even if you are like a pure powerlifter and powerlifting is your pure one goal or whatever, you still, not the way I think a lot of people do it, but like you're still kind of a hybrid athlete, as in like you're a human and you need to maintain at least like a base, like really, really low threshold, but like a minimal level of like conditioning and a minimal level of like a couple of other different attributes that are going to enhance your ability to have the work capacity or like I don't know, like that are going to allow you to do the strength side of it, the powerlifting side of it as best you can, right? So like, I think not just minimal on strength or not just minimal on hypertrophy, but minimal of like how little fucking cardio can I do? And we've done that before, but how little can I do to like not be completely shithouse at it? And so like it's we all, their minimums are important to know as coaches, so we can kind of like satisfy people without killing them. Even though like I know I've athletes that do tons of cardio and like, but we put it in and we lay it out in a way that they're not interfering with each other, and that's really what matters.
Yeah. And when it comes to it as well, I think that athletes who become more and more experienced can appreciate this more, that you get to a point where any progression is positive. When you first start, you're upset that you didn't put 40 kilos on your total like the first time you did it. Yep. When you've been doing it for long enough, you get a small volume PB, you're like, this is a great week. Yeah. Like, I'm having a really good time. Yeah. And as you continue to progress, they become more and more important. So if someone says to me, hey, I can keep progressing after training for a decade whilst still having, a bit of spare time to work on, more education and do more life things and have a bit more fun, that sounds fucking fantastic.
Yeah, to most people. Yeah.
Like it sounds really good, and that's only being able to be accomplished because I very clearly know what's enough and what's not enough. And then if I want to get yoked, well, you just put the slider up, do a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like super important to know. There are other situations where minimal doses are important to know or important to like just consider. So like a situation, like easiest one is a deload or like a low stress week. If we feel like somebody's fatigue is pushing the limits and impacting their training in a negative way, and we want to take a lower stress week to allow recovery to come back up, fatigue levels to drop, and for them to like continue on their merry way of progression after it. Like we can know, hey, this is like where we can pull it back to. Often we're not going back to absolute minimums. Like we're just kind of dropping them, enough to get the result that we're looking for. But like knowing how low you can go is plenty. What's your thoughts on like the minimum being like different for people? Like how different have you seen it with your guys? Because I know that some of mine, like if I say they have like a deload week because they're fatigued, and like if we drop the squats, the bench, the deadlifts too much, then the following week after that they'll shit the bed on it and they'll just like be crap at it. And so like I need to find like the dose for them that not only achieves the goal of a deload week, which is drop fatigue, but also allows them to progress in the following week, and doesn't take them 2 weeks to get back to baseline or whatever. You know what I mean? Like we don't go too far. Like do you have?
I get what you mean.
Different ends?
I've definitely had people at different ends of that spectrum. I'm just trying to think through why, the minimum does change, and I think the biggest thing that refers to is how much work they were doing initially. So if someone's doing 20 sets, and then you take them to 3, there's a massive decrease in the amount of technical exposure they get. And look, the next week might feel shit, but I haven't really seen somebody completely shit the bed because they had too big of a down week. It's more so like, this felt kind of shitty. Not, I missed every single set and I've imploded and everything feels like death. So I haven't seen, in at least my clients, a drop-off that big. But I just say what minimum is viable just depends on how much they're doing. So if someone's doing 6 sets, you can probably take them to 3. If they're doing 20 sets, you're probably not going to take them to 6 because it's all relevant, dependent on how much fatigue they have based off the work they do.
Yeah. Sometimes just asking them and going like subjectively, like where are you at? Like how much work would you say for yourself to be still confident in your squats? Like how low do you reckon we could take that for you to still feel confident in the movement? And for different people, that's completely different numbers, and we've talked about that before. But for me, for example, like deadlifts for me are pretty much always feel good, and I feel like I can do a couple of sets a week and I'll be completely fine. In fact, I reckon I could drop them for a few months, and it might take me an extra few warm-ups, but I reckon I could still hit them pretty well. Like they just don't really they just come naturally to me a little bit. Whereas bench pressing, before this pro roll prep, I honestly didn't bench for a very long time. I don't want to know. It was like a super long time, and still till a couple of weeks ago, I was only doing like a few sets a week of bench press because it's just not something that like I find overly enjoyable, but it's unfortunately part of the sport. So it's something that I've noticed. Definitely, even though I've got very proficient, very confident, very consistent in my benching before, like after that amount of time off, coming back to it, I was just like, what the fuck am I doing? Like the things were in my head because it's not like I stopped coaching people to bench press because I was like, squeeze your back, you do all this stuff, and I know how to bench, but then when you go to do it, it's like, I don't know, just shit just doesn't want to just do it the way that it should do, and then and it's not until now, which is a couple of months after bringing it back, even though it's been completely minimal doses, and that I've actually, in this last week, started to feel like, that's how you bench. Like, that's right. I can control it now and feel a little bit more comfortable under the bar and a little bit more comfortable, especially when I start to get fatigued, to hold that position, which is another skill on its own. Let's talk about some other situations where it might be useful. So, like high stress periods, like when somebody's running through uni exams, or like a really tough position at work, or a relationship breakdown that's super stressful to them, or I don't know, anything along those lines that's like just putting them in a really tough point in life, and there's a lot of stress going on the outside. Their training is their progression on their bench is probably not the priority during a few of those things. And that's the problem.
It should be the top priority. Your marriage is breaking down. You need to be PRing your bench.
That'll show them. But like, Yeah, it's probably not number one. They probably got you got that other stress to deal with. So like knowing kind of what you can get away with, and for us, knowing what knowing how low we can go, and still not have somebody's strength completely crash into the ground is important to know, because like imagine we just did let it turn to complete crap. They come out of that high stressful period of their life and they're like, all right, cool, I'm ready now. And then they go to like bench again and they're like, 100 kilos down from where they were. And it's like, this sucks. Then it's just another wave of depression just after it. So we want to be able to keep them somewhat ready, I guess.
And with circumstances like that as well, I'd say that those periods of high lifestyle stress or high work stress, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most appropriate time for implementing this, just because if in that period you can't recover from what would be regarded as a more optimal training dose, then you're just spinning your wheels anyway. You don't want to do work that's not actively pushing you forward because you're too fucked, or then your injury risk goes up and stuff goes wrong. So in periods like that, being able to do less is good.
I've had people in that boat where they're like, they have a super stressful part of their life, or they're going through, let's say, like a diet, like a hard diet. So they're like, their stress, like systemic stress is higher because of that. Their recovery ceiling's a little bit lower. And they're like, you're like, look, I think we're just doing a little bit too much for the moment. We're not recovering from it. Like there's some indicators that we're going maybe in the wrong direction here. And so like I want to pull this training dose back a little bit and just reduce the overall like amount of work we're doing per week to more evenly like match up with where your recovery is at the moment. And a lot of people go like, holy no, like I don't want to go backwards, so no, like I don't want to do that, because that's like reducing the amount of work is like going backwards to people. But in that situation, like you said, it's the ideal thing to do. It's actually it's actually saving you from going backwards or putting at risk further. So
a perfect example of that is the client that me and Mickey share, who just competed this last weekend. Good old shout out, Paulie boy, my son Paul. He works in a pub. The pub absolutely thrashes him. There was just
this
a
time
lot
of the year
stress
as well.
Nice.
Hospitality sucks.
Hospitality, working over Christmas and stuff like that. He had the fantastic idea to do a prep over Christmas and into the start of the new year, which I was thrilled about. But he had the best prep he's ever done. He PR'd his deadlift. He did some log PRs, some stone PRs on a 3-day strongman prep. And have you ever written a 3-day strongman prep? That program was AIDS. Like, that was like I was.
It would just be very specific, I imagine. It's the same with 3-day powerlifting programs. It's like every day is like 2 out of 3 lifts.
The thing is brutal as well with Paul, we just, established that his recovery is just not great.
Yeah.
Right? Like he was basically at, maintenance all the way through his prep because his weight was very comfortable and all the rest of it. So that's definitely wasn't like a nutritional standpoint or whatever. It was just his training. He was, getting through what he could get through, and the lifestyle of working like big shifts. Like he was doing like 30,000 steps a day during his shifts. Slinging beers, on the pokies.
Strong people.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who, once the old people ran out of money, he's the one who picks them up off the chair and throws them out on the pokies. Nice. He's the pokey revolver.
Yeah, love it. You're done. Somebody else spend money.
Oh, he's Sally. You had enough drinks? You had money? Fuck off.
Yeah, get on out.
We're not here for fun. We're here to take money.
We're here to make money.
Yeah, so he's an example. Yeah, so like doing the minimal dose for him during that period makes a hell of a lot of sense. So how did you find that dose for him though? Like, because obviously like he would have been doing a lot more before when he wasn't going through that high stress period. Like how did you go about finding the right balance?
Pretty much just taper it down, ask how shit you feel.
Yeah.
Pretty well.
Yeah.
You still feel like shit? Yep, okay, keep going down. And eventually we found a point where he still kind of felt like shit, but the objective markers were increasing at a rate that I was like, okay, I think this is it. You feel not awful, but also you're progressing. This is probably the sweet spot. We don't want you feeling good, because if you're feeling good, that's a problem.
Do you have a like a number of how many sets per week that kind of was for him?
off the top of my head, no, because there was a lot of moving events and really weird. Like one of the sets was like a 3 stone loading thing.
And that's just something that you have to take into consideration when programming for strongman as well. Is
strongman's just
like
silly
a sets
in general.
amount that's
It's just harder to quantify a little bit. Yeah, but it's still the principle still apply.
Like if I was to try and put it into like a perspective from like a powerlifting point of view, it would probably have been a program that's around like 45 to 50 hard sets to pull a number square. Yeah, to pull a number square out of the arse.
Combined.
Yeah, probably around there. Bad. Yeah, it's not awful, but it's not. Yeah, it's on the lower end.
Yeah. My lower guys for sure, like 40, 50 is about
over 3 days too.
If you're doing 30, it's like you're doing 10 sets, 3 times a week. It's pretty low unless you're specifically going like a minimum dose like we're talking about, and you're actually aiming for the complete low end because something in life is forcing you to do that. But in that circumstance, you were trying to find more like the balancing point. You weren't like specifically going for like how little can I get away with.
Not how low can we go. It was more so how low can we go.
Do we have to go?
Yeah, how low, exactly. How low do we have to go? Not how low can we go.
And I think just another thing to kind of consider there is that this was a peak, so intensities were considerably different to what it would be during an off season as well.
Yeah. Yes, definitely not ideal for a peak. However, you can still do it.
A peak, you generally lower overall volume, anyways. Though
I think that's the take home point about this minimum thing, and why potentially a minimalist approach over an optimal approach would make sense to some people. For the people who don't get why you would ever want to take that approach, is that like sometimes life happens, shit happens, and you have to, all these things that we're talking about are just examples, and the list could go on of situations where it just makes sense. Like some people just want, some people like, another one would be like heavy time constraints. I only have 45 minutes to an hour 3 times a week, and like that is my cap. Like my life is busy. Like most people, when they say that, I'm like, really though? Like, is that, can we find some time? But like if somebody's dead serious, that is literally all they can, then obviously like a full minimalist approach, like getting the most out of every minute in there is going to be really important if they want to make big gains, So like
if I want to
some people,
jump
I was just going to say, to some people, that efficiency of the session, getting the most out of the session in a small amount of time, the ROI needs to be high, as opposed to just laying out what is optimal, and if it takes 5 hours, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to add in, if I wanted to jump on my soapbox for a second. Yes. People think once they pass a certain amount of volume that it's like those, do you know those little spikes in a parking lot you can drive over but not back up?
Yes. Yeah.
They think it's like that. So once you cross over into 3-day-a-week bench territory, you can't go back, because now that's less, and less is always bad. Yeah. It's not how progression works. There's always going to be a dose and a response. Yeah, 3-day-a-week benching with 20 sets might read you the biggest response for the biggest dose.
Yeah.
But as you pull it back, it doesn't mean that just because the dose lowers, yes, the response lowers, but it doesn't just turn around. You don't just magically go backwards. The rate just decreases a little bit. An emphasis on a little bit. So you can drop days, you can change things around, you can go from 5 days to 3 days, from 3 days to 4 days, and realistically not see a massive change. It's more so the cumulative difference over an extended period. The cumulative results from 20 months of 4-day-a-week training is most likely going to be a bit higher than 3-day-a-week training if everything's equated for with recovery. Because the person who does more and still recovers probably gets better quicker. Would you agree with that? Like a general statement?
Yeah, and also like the higher the frequency, like we talked about frequency at length before, but like the higher frequency, you're more fresh for the sessions. You can lay things out in a slightly more ideal way for skill and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely.
So it's not saying that optimizing those variables or pushing to the higher ends is ever a bad thing, because you'll most likely get better quicker. But it never just looks like perfect all the way through. Sometimes that rate of progress, just like the progress itself, varies a little bit. Sometimes if you get 2 months off work and all you're going to do is eat chicken breast, because you're going to eat chicken breast and train, then that rate of progress might go up a little bit quicker. And then when you go back to work and Sally's breathing down your neck for that next financial report, well, it goes down a little bit.
Yeah, I actually can go through that with a few clients right now because this week or last week for most people was like return to work for like tradies and things like that. And so like during their 4, 6, 8 week off kind of period over the Christmas time, we came to the agreement of like, let's fucking go. Like if they weren't going on holidays, like let's do it. And so we put the foot down, added a little bit more total workload and got a lot of result out of it. But if they kept that up whilst going back to their physical job, like a lot of these people like laborers and things like that, like it's not going to work. So now we're like, okay, let's especially this first week back, I try to like deload for it if timelines worked, but at least kind of like lowering the dose. And I have one person who's in prep and we can't really do that even though he's gone back to work. So like we've just put a bit of a hawkeye on recovery and just gone like, let's really pay attention to this because it's going to be super important to manage. But yeah, for most people, we had to bring it back down to just align it. So it's a real practical, like that is a thing. Like, it happens a lot.
You got to make hay while the sun shines.
So what's the one thing I also wanted to talk about, and we've talked, I think half the episodes are us talking about like a little bit of a long-term mental approach to it and everything, but we at least mention this all the time. But it's another example of this like minimalistic kind of like lower dose approach. But I often see when it's hard to give an exact explanation for it, but like when people go through really hard consecutive training blocks where they're pushing really hard, they're super specific, the volume's higher, they're making a lot of like general strength, hypertrophy, lots of gains across the board, also accumulating a lot of fatigue and a lot of the things that come with that. And then they burn out a little bit mentally, they kind of get a little bit over it, and it no longer becomes super, like we can't just keep it up. We can't just keep going like, no, you must go into the gym and do the things that you hate. So it's like we step away from it a little bit. We go into something completely different, whether it's dunks, whether it's bodybuilding stuff, whether it's whatever. And then
max effort sprints.
Whatever, and then we find them back. Then when we come back to it, then when they're a little bit more mentally fresh, a little bit like, that felt nice. Okay, I'm ready to come back to powerlifting now, and they're a little bit more like focused and zoned in on it. That they come back, and then within a few weeks, they start just banging PBs. Like I see that a lot with people. Like, have you seen that theme? Like, I can't really explain it. To me, what we're seeing is like just a result of the fatigue. Like they had a lot of training fatigue built up, but we're still moving forward. And then when we get rid of that, obviously, like when they come back to it, they can actually show that. So it's kind of like peaking in a very fucking weird way. But I think it has a lot to do with the mental side of it as well. Like, when you think you're doing everything correctly, but you're like hating it, I don't know. There's a difference. Like, I don't know, if I'm not enjoying something and I'm just kind of like going through the motions and getting my sets done and getting my work done and doing what's on a piece of paper, it works, but like it's not the same as like rocking up to the gym, like loving it, like ready to go. Like just there's a difference in my mind between just like ticking boxes, which is sometimes necessary, and like thriving and like living it and loving it. Like the results that come from it are different.
Like if we strip that back a bit, just to add, not a caveat, but to add a bit more of an explanation there, in that circumstance where you're saying, yep, this person's burnt out, they've been pushing really hard, now let's add something fun, let's give them something new to just help recharge that battery or fill the kerosene in the lamp, whatever you want to say. In that period,
what was that? Was that just for the new age? And then if people are listening from like the 2,000 years ago, there's an example there for you too.
I've been thinking about candles and lamps for the last 20 minutes. I couldn't tell you why.
If you're from the Stone Age and you're listening, here's a good metaphor for you.
Fill your kerosene. But in those periods where you add whatever little bit of pizzazz that you want to the program, it's not like you'd fully take everything else out. It's not like, cool, you were doing powerlifting, now you're going to do 7 plyometric sessions and just do ollie lifting for 3 weeks and then you're back to it. In those circumstances, it's more like, well, you've pulled the heavy shit back to the minimums.
Yeah.
They're still progressing with those minimums.
Yep.
They're still confident. And then, like you said, when they get back, that veil of fatigue has been lifted. They feel fresh and they're ready to fuck shit up. And that's most likely where it's coming from, that even in that period of decreased work, they're still progressing. And then you're kind of just freshening up. They come back with those fresh eyes. And to them, it feels like magic because they're like, wow, I've done less and I've gotten stronger. What is this? Well, it's proof in the concept that doing less still gets you stronger. Just maybe not at the fastest rate.
Yeah, I feel like it's also important, like when we mentioned, like when you're doing that high workload, when there's a lot of progress. Like, sometimes, like when you're doing like really hard training blocks and you're doing a lot of work, the little increases week to week don't seem like a lot. You're like, fuck, man, I just feel like I'm not getting that much stronger. And then it just when you like you remove that fatigue, we obviously know that it comes forward. But during those phases, I often find people want to change shit. As in, like, I'm only moving forward at, like, I'm only adding 5 kilos a week to my squat in this phase. Like, it's just, I don't know if that's much. They kind of look at that. Maybe they're doing like 5s or something, and they kind of go like, I don't know, if, like that the PB seems so far away at this fucking point. Like, oh my god. And then because of fatigue, you don't really account for it in a moment. But and the emotion wants to take over, and you want to kind of go like, maybe I'm not doing enough, and then you want to add more. So like going back to what you said before, in that any progress like week to week is incredible most of the time. It's especially true in like higher volume phases. Like if you're doing a lot of work, any little tiny steps forward are massive, because you know that it's under this kind of cloud of fatigue, and that when you remove that, it'll pay dividends. But in the moment, it's so fucking hard. Like your emotions are just like, this sucks. I don't feel like I'm getting strong. So yeah. Anyway, completely not really on topic, kind of on topic. But let's go some more like practical advice, both a mix of the science and maybe your and my like minimum doses that we have got either with ourselves, like that we've found with ourselves or clients. So kick us off with like science says, because there is a little bit of science.
Yeah, so I've got the numbers down. What's the bloke's name? Give him a shout out. Like, we know that on a podcast this large, that's going to be a massive boost to his. That's it. We're doing him a favor. So the numbers that came out of a few different papers that came together, and I will try my best to read these verbatim, but if I butcher them, just pay for mass and then look it up on mass.
Yeah.
Close enough's good enough. So they based a lot of these studies off what would be defined as a meaningful improvement, and the way they found a meaningful improvement for all the main 3 lifts in a total was they just did a large, survey of lifters and coaches, and they defined that a meaningful improvement in a squat was 7.1 kilos, give or take, bench 4.4 kilos, give or take, deadlift 8.1, and total 17.5. And just to make a note there,
is this a percentage though? Because like
kilos.
If
4
you
kilos on a bench.
500 kilos, if you're Vlad and you're going like, well, 7 kilos, man, like fuck.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking good. Like, I look at 4 kilos on a bench and I would do unspeakable things for a 4 kilo bench PR. But like, so what they're saying is meaningful improvement. They're reasonably substantial numbers as a whole.
Yeah.
What they did a couple of different applications, and they came to the conclusion that in these low ranges, completing sets and reps in these schemes, we're a 99% chance of a meaningful improvement. So a really high chance of at least getting close to some of the numbers outlined there. So a rate of improvement that people would say, hey, this isn't shit. Yeah. And for most main work and well-trained individuals, it's only about 3 to 6 sets between 1 to 5 reps. at or over 80% intensity. So it's not a lot, but it's got to be pretty heavy.
It's not a lot. You say it's not a lot, but I swear to fucking God, like that's my training. Like that's where I've made like the most gains. You know what I mean? Like outside of the first few years of powerlifting, where I could definitely get away with a lot of volume. Like that's the sweet spot with me. And then obviously I guess it depends on the rest of the program too, right? Because like they're probably talking like highly specific, like they're only counting the SBD comp specific sets. Whereas for me, like I've always found that for me, like on my squat, just doing a few sets for this to kind of tick the box for the skill aspect on like my low bar back squat is enough, and then I can go and annihilate myself on like a belt squat or something that's kind of similar, but like a lot more forgiving on my body, on my joints, on my everything. And then I've always found a much better result from that. But again, like they're taking a big average from people or whatever. So like
I think it's important to mention as well that, and I was actually talking to the boys on the education call this morning about this. There's kind of a delineation in lifters between you're shit at the thing and you're good at it. Generally, people who are good at the thing can get away with a bit less because what they're doing is of high quality. If you're just awful at the thing, man, you probably need more. And I think that's an important thing to say here as well. That they actually said in less trained individuals, that same rate of improvement can be achieved in 1 to 3 sets of 6 to 12 reps between 75 and 85%.
Yeah. Fair.
But that's like if I said to you, do 3 sets of 12 at 85% of your low bar back squat, would you die? Would you? How much is that?
I'd be like, fuck, 12 reps, man. What are you fucking doing?
Well, to put it into perspective, what is 85% for you?
In reps. Instead of 12
in reps. What are you kidding me, man? Like, this is real life we're talking about.
Do the math, and I'll keep going.
Well, like 385. If my squat's 385, and then 85% of that with 327.
Could you do 327 for 3 sets of 12? Because that is
maybe do it for 3 reps on a great day.
12
what's my
3
rep PB? Like 320, I think. So I mean, yeah.
Only because you hate squatting, like with a passion.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, most of the time.
It's a love-hate. But yeah, so the less trained individuals can get away with doing more volume.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I think if you've ever trained anybody in a gem pop situation, you know that's true.
Yeah.
Because like I could go to like, anyone in a like who's of average kind of strength and size in a commercial gym and go like, the best way to get good at squats is to do 10 sets of 10. And if they listen to me and do 10 sets of 10, I reckon they'll get way better. Whereas if I walk up to Anthony and just go like, hey man, 10 sets of 10, that's our new protocol. Like he'd do it because he's a fuck.
He'd do it. Yeah, I was going to say that. He'd still do it.
But he'd probably implode and, so it's, pick your... But yeah, I think that makes sense. I can agree with that. Yep.
Yeah. So with the lower dosages, the higher intensity is important.
Yep.
And the cool thing is, they noted what he called low range maintenance to a very slight % chance of meaningful improvement.
Yeah,
I think it was like 4 to like 2%, like something really fucking little that you'll achieve a meaningful improvement, but you won't go backwards.
Okay.
And the sample sizes weren't huge, but still relevant. You can achieve that in 1 to 3 sets a week of 1 at like fuck off hard, just heavy, just RPE, prolapse anus.
Does that match your experience with people? Because like that matches me. That's
it matches me for deadlift and squat. Bench not so much because I can't push bench really hard because I just fall over.
Again, I think it depends on where you come from. You know what I mean? Like if you're used to doing 15 sets of each lift per week, and then you go like, we're going to try this new thing where we just do like one. After you get that initial boost from like you hit a couple of weeks of good numbers because of the fatigue drop off or whatever, like we were talking about. After that, like he's probably not going to see a whole lot of improvement. You know what I mean? Whereas if you're like me and haven't benched in a couple of years and then you come back and do 1 set per week, oh wow, like I'm getting heaps better at bench. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah, it's also the matter of the stimulus as well. I am now going to equate power lifts to bath bombs because I'm special.
Excellent. Yep.
Did you just flex in the camera?
Flex. I didn't do it on purpose, but now that you mention it.
Now that you mention it, I look yoked. But yeah, so it's the same as if you have a really little bath bomb, and that's your single, and you put it in the bath, you're just getting like a slight scent of daiquiri and a couple of sparkles. But if you're strong as fuck and you have this big old bath bomb in the bath, you've now set an entire environment of pretty bath bomb. So therefore, if you're strong, you can get away with less.
Yeah.
To carry on from that, with
I think that's what you were saying anyway. I'm not really sure, but I'll take your word for it.
You threw me with the flexing.
No, it is distracting for a lot of people.
It's just Craig. Craig now has to change his underpants because we'll flex. Love you, Craig. So for the hypertrophy ranges, a little simpler. So I don't know if it's just because I can't read, but I didn't see what they defined as a meaningful improvement in hypertrophy. I couldn't see that in the paper. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think
it's harder.
I think the obvious one would be like if you look in the mirror and you like want to flex a little bit because you're seeing the gains and you're like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, I'm looking bigger. Like if like that would be meaningful. Yeah. Like if you can look in the mirror and go like, fuck yeah, boy, like that's I think that's the scientific way of measuring it.
The intensity of the yeah boy when you look at yourself butt naked. So what they said there was anywhere between 4 to 6 sets per body part per week can rear a meaningful improvement, but with working in decent proximity to failure. And then like the good boy cream of the crop range is like over 9 sets per body part. That's like hey, you got extra time to make sure your medial delt and your lateral clavicular pec is looking fucking good. Do 9.
That's why we're like, and then like you were talking like meaningful improvement. So, like, minimum dose would be even less, which is, in previous podcasts, we've talked about it. Like, the amount you need to do for hypertrophy to, like, not get smaller is ridiculous compared to the amount that you need to do to get bigger. Like, once you're there, like, you're just on cruise control. Yeah. It's so good.
Like, if you can get meaningful improvement with 4 hard sets of bicep curls a week, how many people are doing more sets than 4 bicep curls? And look, if you're a Mr. Olympia competitor and you're on enough drugs to kill a small village and you have 82-inch arms, okay, you probably need more than 4.
Yeah, but there's a whole nother discussion of this, and we won't go down that road of like crossover volume and stuff like that.
Yeah. But in this, and he was specific, he wasn't counting like the bit of biceps you get from a row in these prescriptions.
Okay.
So it was just cool. You're doing 4 sets of curls. That's your biceps. You're doing 4 sets of rows, it's your back. And then he said it got squirrely defining like different sectors of the back, but we're not scientists here. So fuck that. Just do enough. 4 to 6, you're probably fine.
Yeah, okay. That's fair enough. I agree with that for the most part. Does that align with what you've seen? Or?
100%. And I think a big problem that you end up seeing is people will just try and pick hypertrophy for everything. And they'll say, cool, it's a hypertrophy block. We're now doing 120 sets and everything has to get bigger. When you could realistically just say, hey, look, like me, I really just want bigger arms at the moment. So I think I'm doing like 15 sets. Yeah,
that's where you're going down the route of like specialization blocks and stuff like that. Which as a bodybuilder or as a person whose like main goal is hypertrophy, it's a real problem that you'll run into eventually, is that you just can't. At the start, you can grow everything at once. And it's the same as powerlifting. Like, go back and look at like a program like Starting Strength or whatever, where it's just like 5x5, just 3 barbell movements or whatever. Just big compound lifts. They're not really isolating anything, just doing like that. And you can get meaningful improvement on that, and then eventually have to specialize. And maybe if you get to a certain level in powerlifting, you maybe in this block we're really focusing on deadlifts and kind of putting squats at a more of a minimal dose. Usually it's, for me, like whether it's on purpose or not, like a squat and a low bar squat and benching kind of compete a little bit, as in like if you do enough low bar squatting and you're a immobile enough person, it kind of fucks up your bench. So it's really hard to get the best of both and push both forward hard at the same time. So like we'll focus on more like in an off season, we can hit way like a fair amount of bench press sets and a fair bit of get a lot of progression down that road.
You've got a Harry Potter one of them.
I'm not saying get rid of squats. I'm just saying like we just change it slightly, so we're doing like safety bar or some shit like that. So
yeah, like lock it under the stairs. Like it's still there, but you just go to Harry Potter it. Put him under the staircase. It gets a little bit of food, a couple of sets here and there, but it stays under the staircase.
Yeah, I think you've this episode you've I don't want to say fallen off, but like just lost me on a couple of these.
I couldn't find the aircon remote at the start of recording, and it's hot as balls in here. I've got like this one bead of sweat dripping down the middle of my back. I'm incredibly uncomfortable.
Right. That's like the one day a year that you have to deal with it down there anyway. It'll be cold enough.
36 degrees, and our house gets sun all day. Whatever degree outside it is, it's 6 degrees hotter in the top part of our house. It could kill an old person. It's a problem.
Love how you just try to justify like your one bead of sweat, like just by relating it to somebody dying. Like I'm trying to make this sound important, guys. So yeah, don't worry, it'll be snowing tomorrow. No in Melbourne, so
that's fair. That's fair.
Cool. All right, let's leave it there. If anybody can relate to any of that, they found more the minimum dose better for them in terms of progression. If you've tried to push higher, if you've had experience with like hybrid stuff or that you've high stress periods or times where you've had to take that approach and found it really useful with yourself or clients, hit us up because it's a super interesting topic. I think that it's like obviously they've studied it, but it's really hard to study. Like I'm more interested in like the personal experience side of this because I think there is a lot of relevance to it and application to it.
The research gives you a good base to be able to start squirreling from and say, cool, this looks like it's around the right spot. We'll start here, then we'll fuck around. You've got to fuck around and find out.
Well, that's all science ever is, really. So,
cool.
Pretty much.
All right. I'll catch you later.
Red hot. Thank you for listening to Nexus Unloaded. Be sure to jump on our website to find details on everything mentioned on today's podcast, plus information on our coaching, mentoring, and gym services. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at NexusPerformance.Aus for any updates on what we are currently doing. See you all in the next episode.